Welcome back, bienvenue, and all that jazz. It's been a hot minute, but I'm going to start working on doing mini reviews to catch up on my recent reads from the year of 2025. But before I jump into that, I will just give a little bit of a life update so you kind of know where I've been, what's been going on for me, and then I'll start jumping into the kind of reviews and things of that sort. So first of all, I got a new job, and so that required me to move. So I've been moving, settling into the new place, setting up my books finally to have all my book babies back, which is lovely, but it's just been a lot for me. And so I've just been very tired settling into the new job, being trained on the new things, settling into the new apartment and unpacking. And so I just have not had the extra oomph to film at the end of the days, but I'm back once again. And so that's kind of what I've been up to. It's been very exciting. I really love the new place. We settled into San Diego and I really quite like it here so far. And I've been enjoying learning new things at my job. And so it's just been a really nice change and transition for me. With that being said, we'll now jump into the books. And so what my plan is to maybe just do mini reviews for 8 books at a time and then kind of go from there, because I think so far this year I've read 40 or 50 books. And so doing 8 books per chunk, and maybe I'll try to film every week or every other week, something of that nature, so then eventually I'll catch up. Hopefully. As usual, I guess I'll do these in ascending star order just for funsies, or I guess I could just do them in the order in which I read them. I guess I'll just do them in the order in which I read them, because why not? That's different for me. So the first thing I'll start with was the first book that I finished in the year of 2025. So this is the first read in January, and that was Immortal by Sue Lynn Tan. And I gave this book 4.5 stars because I was actually quite surprised how much I ended up enjoying it. This book is set in the same world as her Daughter of the Moon Goddess duology, but it is not directly related and doesn't really spoil anything for that duology. So if you wanted to read this standalone to kind of get a taste of the world and her magic systems and things of that sort before you jump into the duology, you could definitely do that. Or if you've read the duology and it's been a minute and you're like, do I know enough to jump into Immortal? They're kind of like separate, just in the same world. And in this particular book, we follow a main character who kind of gets thrust into a position of power. And this position of power is in this region where the gods had protected them at some point in the past and have kind of required of them to protect this region moving forward. And so they feel kind of stuck. And so there's this kind of dichotomy between her trying to do her best for her people, and then she gets sent to the Celestial Kingdom to try to barter to get them out of this deal that had been made generations ago, because obviously the Immortals have no concept of time. And so there's some interesting political kind of maneuvering and things of that sort, but really at the end of the day, this book is centered around a central romance, and I actually quite enjoyed the romantic pair. I really liked their interactions, and we got to see them kind of build their relationship. And there were things that I wasn't necessarily expecting about their relationship that are probably kind of more common romance tropes, but I don't really want to say anything because I don't want to risk spoiling it. But I will say, if you are a fantasy fan who likes dabbling with a strong romantic element or a strong romantic plot, but you don't like the romance to be the entire focus of the story and you're not necessarily into the smuttiest of smut, then I think that Immortal would be a really good option for you, especially if you're into Chinese folklore and mythology, because it just feels very much steeped in those things. And the one thing that I really like the most about Sue Lynn Tan's books that I've read so far is just the kind of vivid, almost painterly nature of her world with like purple clouds and just the evocative imagery that she uses, I think, is really effective. And so it was a great way to start off the year. I actually had quite a good reading month in the month of January. I think I had 3 5-star reads, at least that I'm talking about so far. I don't know about the other books in January, but for now, we'll move on. So the next thing that I read was The Warrior's Apprentice, and this is by Lois McMaster Bujold, and this is part of the Vorkosigan saga. This is, I think, maybe the 3rd book that I read, because I'm reading them, I think, in world chronological order, but it's all based on Angela from Literature Science Alliance, and she now has a full video about should you read Vorkosigan and reading order that she suggests. And so I will point you to her video to get any of those details about that kind of thing. I do remember with Warrior's Apprentice, though, there was one character that we were introduced to in the first kind of pseudo-duology with Shards of Honor and Barayar, who surprisingly is very dark and very messed up, and yet somehow you can kind of empathize with him. Like, Lois McMaster Bujold has this kind of magical ability to mix fun, campy sci-fi adventure with kind of hard-hitting themes that kind of sneak up on you and actually really dark content matter at times. So just know, maybe if you're sensitive, that you might want to look up some trigger warnings and things for her books, because they can be rather intense at times. And this one The first half was kind of just fun adventure times, and then the second half we really started tackling with justice and repercussions of horrific actions, and can somebody truly be redeemed if they've done horrific things. And just, I don't know, just the way that she does these things I think is just really magical. Overall, this wasn't my favorite book that I've read so far in the Vorkosigan universe. I did end up giving this book 4 stars though, and really quite enjoyed it. And I would recommend you check out Vorkosigan, starting with Shards of Honor and Barayar at some point if you're so inclined, or go check out Angela's video for more details for somebody who's read the entire Vorkosigan series and everything, and every possible side story and things that are involved with it, and you can get a more probably rounded perspective from her. And so the next thing I'll just tie into this was The Mountains of Mourning, and this is kind of more of a short story slash novella, again in the Vorkosigan universe, and this one I actually gave 5 stars because just the way that we were dealing with kind of the repercussions of colonialism almost, where there are these small pockets of more rural communities who are kind of left out from the quote-unquote advancement of society around them, and how society tends to ostracize these peoples and just kind of almost villainize them. And yet, even within their own communities, there are people who are on both sides of whether or not they should be giving in and going along with the technological advancements or staying true to their culture as they know it, and how those things kind of can come to a head even within a small community. And at the center of this story is a murder mystery, which I also found quite compelling. And so it was just kind of magical, the perfect length for what it was, really impactful, really just fantastic. And so I would highly, highly recommend you check out Vorkosigan, because all of it, there's always something where, like, even if it's fun adventure campy times and maybe it's not my favorite thing, or if it's slower and more conversational, there's always aspects of it where it's just fascinating. And some of the sci-fi elements that she plays with are also really cool. I've just been having so much fun with Vorkosigan, and I really need to get back on the bandwagon and continue on with my Vorkosigan journey. I think I've read the first 4 or 5 things, and so I just need to keep going at some point. And then the next thing I'll talk about was part of a big reading kind of challenge thing that Elle from Elliot Brooks, Joshana from Joshana C, and I did together, where we were trying to see, like, who knew our taste better. Was it our subscribers? Was it our friends? And so this next book I read as part of that. It wasn't specifically recommended to me. It was actually one of the books that was recommended to Elle by Joshana. But it was An Accident of Stars by Meadows, and I gave this 4.5 stars. But if you're interested in learning more kind of about that reading challenge and how we all kind of felt and who quote-unquote won with best recommendations, we actually just recently did a fundraiser live show over on World Hopper, so I will link that video below and try to remember to link it in the up above. So if you want to see us kind of hash it out and argue about books that we all read together, you can go check out that video. But this book is Portal Fantasy, but I've read a lot of Portal Fantasy over the years, whether or not that's things like Keeper of the Lost Cities, Percy Jackson, the series that we do not name, or the Prospero's Children. I've read a lot of Portal Fantasy, and it's quite nostalgic for me. And I think that one thing that this series does that most series don't when they're doing Portal Fantasy is it's not just fun, adventure, magical, whimsy times. This really kind of examines what it would be like if you were a teenager in high school who got teleported to a different world. You don't speak the language, you don't understand the cultures. It is very different from the world that you're used to, and kind of what can happen and the trauma that can come along with that, being thrust into this kind of coup against a regime. And just, it's so good. And I do think that book 2 is better. I will come to that in a second because it's on this list as well to talk about. So I guess I'll just talk about it now to kind of combine them. And so the sequel is The Tyranny of Queens, and I gave that book 5 stars. And so overall, they make the Manifold Worlds duology. And I just think the things that are played with in this duology with Saffron, our main character, and her trauma from the contemporary world, her trauma from the Portal Fantasy world, and this kind of action adventure coup that is also going on, and just the rich world building in a very queer normative world with polyamory as well. So if you've been looking for something that's just quite different in its world building and yet also feels nostalgic and comfortable at the same time, I really can't recommend the Manifold Worlds duology enough. It is so good and very underhyped, underrated, under talked about. So I recommend you go check it out. as soon as possible if any of those things sound good to you. And then the next thing, speaking of Jashana, she has been doing a Ryuria along, or Elan along, I don't remember what she called it, a read-along for all of the works by Michael J. Sullivan set in the world of Elan. And so we've been starting and going in world chronological order. So we started with the Legends of the First Empire series, and we've been doing one per month. The book for January was Age of Myth, book 1, and the Legends of the First Empire. And I just really love these characters. I really love the way that Michael J. Sullivan blends classic fantasy and adventure fantasy with more modern character work. And he has a sense of humor that does creep in at times that I could see being kind of polarizing. He also does something where you could argue it's convenient, where our core cast of characters make every kind of meaningful discovery and technological advancement that they need in order to succeed in their missions. However, I do think that the lore and the world building is so fascinating, and the way that Michael J. Sullivan will sneak in with a sucker punch to your freaking kidneys when he wants to give an emotional gut blow is just kind of unmatched for me. I really, really love the Legends of the First Empire. I do have a full spoiler-free review for Age of Myth, so I will link that. And you can check that out if you want more details specifically on Age of Myth from when I had only read Age of Myth and hadn't read almost everything in the world of Elan minus the prequel stories for Royce and Hadrian. I can't recommend highly enough. And I do think that at some point, maybe when we finish Age of Empire at the end of June, there will be some kind of live show wrapping up the Legends of the First Empire. So stay tuned for more details about that as we get closer to it. And then the next thing I'll talk about is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft. I believe this is a standalone kind of YA gothic fantasy mystery kind of story. And I overall gave this book 3 stars because I was kind of just let down. It didn't do enough of the fantasy to feel like a really standalone fantasy, because we were following these people who kind of travel around and they're kind of scholars and they investigate different kinds of mythological and fantastical wildlife in their world, but we really didn't see very much of that or the wildlife or the lore and things that I wanted. So with that premise, I thought I was going to get a lot more of that aspect of it. And the murder mystery was kind of important for like the first chunk of it, and then it kind of fell down the wayside, and we weren't very effective at doing any mystery things. And so the mystery kind of felt a little bit flat, and it ended up being more about this kind of political fantasy thing that I wasn't kind of expecting. So it wasn't really what I wanted from it. And I don't think that it was very good at the mystery or the political aspects. I just think it was trying to do too much in one standalone novel. If this had been a series and there was time to like let things breathe and build up to the more kind of empire defining things, then I think it would have been a more effective story. Just as a standalone, it just was not enough of any one thing to really keep me satisfied, but it wasn't bad. I do think that the gothic-y vibes were fun. There was this kind of sapphic yearning that was also fun, but it just overall left me a little bit wanting. And then the last thing that I'll talk about in this chunk of reviews is Engines of Empire by R.S. Ford. This is book 1 in the, is it the Age of Uprising? Age of something? What is the series? It is. It is the Age of Uprising. I had to check. It's over there somewhere. And this is beginning to a trilogy, and book 3 is coming out, I want to say in June. So it will be a completed series very soon, and I have since read book 2. But book 1 in particular was a very solid book, hence it getting 4 stars. It just wasn't an all-time favorite because some of the things about the characters I found a little bit frustrating, but this is kind of a series for fans of A Song of Ice and Fire. If you want multi-POV, political maneuvering, backstabbing, and all of the kind of things that go along with that, but you want it in a more kind of steampunk magic-y world, then I think that this series is really kind of right up your alley. We do have like the mysterious magical force that we get introduced to in the prologue, kind of like the White Walkers, but it's not White Walkers, it's some like weird demonic possession type deal. So we get introduced to that, and then we kind of jump over and start being enmeshed in all of the political maneuverings of all of the people that are vying for power and the guilds that currently hold power versus the church that kind of wants power, and the kind of back and forth between these. And so I think it's just a very good, solid thing. I do think the characters get a little bit annoying at times. There is one in particular who is kind of in charge of one of the guilds, and she constantly puts herself in positions where she's like, I know I shouldn't do this. They're probably going to betray me. And then she gets betrayed and she's like, oh no. And like really bad things happen because of her being betrayed and her putting her kind of trust out there for these people. And so at times I'm just like, you just, why? But other than that, I thought it was a really good, solid time. That kind of wraps up the first chunk of books that I want to talk about for the year. I will be back soon with 8 more books to talk about, so stay tuned for that. And please do all the things. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more bookish shenanigans like this from me. Other than that, I do hope you've been having a great 2025, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!